For more on this, we are being joined by Dov Zakheim from Washington, D.C. He is former Undersecretary of Defense in the George W. Bush administration and currently senior advisor at Center for Strategic and International Studies. Dov, welcome back to WION, and thank you for joining us. What kind of assurances is President Biden looking to get from Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Well, the president is worried actually on two separate counts. The first is the question that you've just mentioned of humanitarian aid. In fact, it's been reported that Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, told the Israelis in that virtual meeting that they just held that that the Israelis were on the verge of being labeled provoking an actual famine. It would only be the third time in years that a famine has actually been declared by the Integrated Food Security Classification, and that would be very bad for Israel. And I think President Biden is going to raise that issue and tell the Israelis they simply have to allow food, medicine, all the things that people need to live on, to let it into Gaza, and obviously to stop targeting aid workers. A couple of hundred have already been killed, and of course, Andres's program that you just heard, they were clearly marked as a food aid, and yet they were hit. So the president's going to talk about that. The other thing he's going to talk about is how to deal with Rafah and how to deal with moving civilians away from the war zone. Now, the Israelis told the American side, my side, that they can do this all in 4 weeks. That clearly is unrealistic. The American side told the Israelis it'll take them months to do this, and they shouldn't move ahead until they've sorted it out. They've got to come up with a realistic plan. Right now, the plans they're offering are not realistic. So I think the president may well raise this issue, perhaps not in the detail I just gave you, but just generally to say that they have to have a concrete plan for assuring that the civilians in the Rafah area are moved out in an orderly fashion and obviously supplied with the needs that they have.
Kamala Harris in a recent interview said, quote, "I am ruling out nothing," when she was asked whether there would be consequences from the U.S. if Israeli operations went ahead in Rafah. What are your thoughts? Would the U.S. go as far as holding back military aid to Israel?
Well, it depends what kind of military aid we're talking about. If it's purely defensive, I think the commitment to protect Israel is still there. On the other hand, if there are weapons that might be interpreted as offensive, they may well hold back on that. Part of the problem, of course, is that the Israelis do have contracts with American manufacturers, and it would be very difficult to suspend those contracts. On the other hand, one possibility is simply not to send more assistance. Another possibility is to tell the Israelis, we abstained in the last Security Council vote. We're not going to abstain in the next one. Clearly, there are ways to pressure Mr. Netanyahu, and he is already under tremendous pressure, I should add, because Benny Gantz, who is way ahead of him in the polls right now and is a member of the War Cabinet, said there should be an election in September. Mr. Schumer, Senator Schumer, who called for early elections, said that Gantz was right on the mark. Schumer clearly reflects the views of the administration, even if he doesn't say so explicitly. And Netanyahu's answer, which was, well, we can't have anything in September during a war, seems to imply that the war will go on into September. Well, that's a problem right there. And then his argument that, well, we can't change leaders in the middle of a war. Well, during 1940, the British got rid of Chamberlain after a disastrous operation in Norway, and Winston Churchill came in, and that was 8 months into a war. So the argument is specious. The pressure is great on Netanyahu. And while the president will probably not refer to an election, that's looming behind everything he says as well.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for that context, Dov Zakheim, joining us from Washington, D.C. I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
Thanks, Susan. Appreciate it.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.